Record on this computer. Okay. So today's topics, the fear of feeling bad or thinking bad things will create more bad things, right? So the law of attraction, if you're in my world, I feel like you probably know a little bit about manifestation, and manifestation is based on actually more than one law. But one of the biggest ones and probably the most well known is law of attraction. And law of attraction says that we create and pull towards us the experiences of what we feel like. And that is true with some caveats. And I'm going to talk about this today because I feel like this is so important and people just skate over this and skate right by it. And it's so important that you guys know how to do this. So I'm really curious if you have ever experienced this because people come into my world and they almost like get obsessive about I can't feel bad, I can't think about bad things, or I'm going to create more bad things. Has that ever happened? Like, and I get like this, and I logically understand how this works, and it still happens because there's so much on the internet about positive vibes only and think positively. And you guys, if you've been in my world, you know that I am not about high vibes only. That is not human. It's not natural. It's not normal for you to be high vibe all the time. And that's pushing you into toxic dynamics where you're pretending everything's fine when it's not fine, and then actually creating yourself or setting yourself up for worse things to happen down the line. Because when we have emotions, we have sensations, and we have thoughts that are bad, it's just our body and our brain asking us to look at it and process it. But a lot of us are not processing it. We're not even looking at it. We don't even want to talk about it. We don't want to touch it. We just push it to the side, and then we go straight into I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, right? And this is where you see mantras. And guys, I am not a huge fan of mantras, and let me explain why and what to do instead, right? So with a mantra or what else do you call them? Not mantras, but I'm trying to think of the other word. I use mantra because it's kind of in alignment with like yoga, and I do a lot of yoga. So the word mantra, but is like fresh for me, but there's another word that people use, like positive affirmations. That's what it is. And let me just first of all differentiate between the two. Positive affirmations can be good if you've done the work to remove the negative thing and you're not just slapping on something positive on top of it. For example, you're sitting on the couch, you're eating like shit, you're not working out, and you're going, I'm healthy, I'm healthy, I'm healthy. And what does your body do? Your body literally will tense up and tell you, no, that's not true. But you're like, oh, if I just have this positive mantra, I'm healthy, I'm happy. Same thing with being happy, I'm rich. A part of you is going to, and usually it's your body, will tense up to tell you that's not true, that's not in alignment. And that's what I mean by just slapping something positive on top of it and not dealing with the actual root of what's causing the problem to begin with. And the difference between a positive mantra or a positive affirmation and a mantra is a mantra. Get this, if you know anything about yoga or that tradition, and you know anything about a mala, the mala are the beads that people wear. There's 108 beads on a mala. The reason for that is you say your mantra 108 times. So unless you want to sit down every day and say your positive affirmation 108 times, it is not going to sink in. It will not work. It can work, but it's going to take you a long time and a lot of effort. So instead, why would you not shortcut it? Why would you not do something like tapping to take out the negative and then install the positive? You guys know in my world, I'm all about efficiency. How do we make the most money with doing the least effort? And not like, listen, I have a thing about being lazy, and it's so ironic because it's a big part of my business model. I don't work a lot. I don't want to work a lot. Like that's a part of my business model, right? And so I have a thing though about being lazy. This goes back to like my childhood and like my grandparents kind of talking shit about my mom to me about her being lazy, and people in my family calling my mom lazy. And as an adult, I very much understand that my mom isn't lazy. She just has a lot of anxiety that presents in a way that other people might perceive as lazy, because I also had a lot of anxiety that can present that way. So I get it as an adult, but doesn't take away the fact that like I have a thing when people call me lazy. It's like a trigger for me. But the truth is the trigger is just asking me to look at why it's a trigger for me. So the irony is that I can help people make money in the most efficient way, right? Like, why are we doing all these extra things that we don't need to be doing? But I have this thing with being lazy. And my business coach was like, oh my God, this is such great content. Like, you should totally talk about, doing lazy or like lazy audits in your business, like how I can help you make money in your business the most efficient and effective way. Because a lot of us are being taught things that we're doing that we don't need to be doing or don't have to be doing in our business. And then those things actually get in the way of us making money because we're too caught up being working on our business and not in our business, right? So, anyways, back to this lazy thing. If I were to just sit here and I would just say something like if I literally think about being called lazy, it literally has a physical response in my body. That's how I know there is a deep trigger here, right? So no matter what I say to myself, my body is still going to respond differently. And you guys know, if you're in my world, we want brain body alignment. We want our brain on board and our body on board. And positive affirmations are only one part of the puzzle. So why would I not use something like tapping to dissolve that physical response, and then and actually I wouldn't even then go into the positive mantra. I would then tap in what I want to feel and then set the positive mantra from there, or positive affirmation. I'm kind of using them interchangeably. They're kind of the same thing. Like, mantras are a little bit different in the yogic like tradition, but I'm not going to get into that on this call. But so I'm going to actually just demo this for you. So being lazy, I feel it like in my stomach. Like if somebody thinks I'm lazy, right? So what I would do is I would tap, like if you guys know anything about EFT tapping, and if you don't, you can always like message me for my training, or it's also in my Aligned as Fuck community. But tapping to get out the sensation. And the other thing that's really important is knowing why being lazy is triggering to me. Like, does anybody ever experience something like, how do I want to articulate this? Like, you're being triggered by something and it's so like, I don't want to say basic, that's probably not the right word, but like it's not actually the problem. It's just your brain's way of telling you that's the problem, because your brain doesn't actually want you to figure out what the problem is, because that means that it's going to have to go through an ego death, and it doesn't like that, right? So when I think about it, being lazy is almost like a worth thing for me. It means like I'm not good, I'm bad, I'm like, I like, lazy isn't actually the problem for me. It's more like underneath, like my perception of what lazy means. And in our culture, in our society, lazy has a serious negative connotation. And I'm not even sure that I care if I think I'm lazy. I think that I care if other people think that I'm lazy, right? And so you start to get clear on like why it's bothering you. And for me, it's very much like, and if you're in my world and you've heard my story, I have a big story from, like, I had a lot of trauma when I was younger, and that trauma resulted in me having this story that I'm a bad person, I deserve bad things. And talk about a self-sabotaging story, because your brain is wired to find like the evidence that what you're saying is true, or what you believe is true. So if you're walking around with this thing of like, I'm lazy, or insert whatever your trigger is, I'm lazy, I'm bad, like I'm not worth it, whatever your story is, your brain will do everything it can to find the evidence that that's true, right? So you got to get really clear on why it's even triggering. A lot of times, like the things, like I'll give you another example. This is another one for me. When I feel like, for example, something really dumb, like right now I'm having some issues with my apartment, and it's really frustrating me, like to the like more than it should. And when I sat down with it, like, yes, okay, it is my apartment, it is my home base, it's where I work from, like it is, I do need things to like be sorted with my apartment. But when I really sat down with why it was triggering me, it wasn't that my landlord wasn't doing the things that she needed to be doing. That is true. But the triggering part was I didn't feel like I'm being heard. That is a deep trigger for me. When I feel like I have a problem and people aren't hearing me. They're not seeing, they're just like here, they're listening, but they're not, or they're like maybe hearing it, but they're not listening. It's not sinking in. Like I don't feel like I'm being seen or heard or taken seriously. And that is a huge trigger for me. So all these things that seem very baseline are actually just deeper things. And what your brain and body are doing by creating uncomfortable sensations or negative thoughts, negative behaviors, negative patterns, negative feelings and emotions is just for you to, it's trying to give you the wisdom of, hey, this is still unhealed. This thing still bothers you. So for me, coming back to me, It's people thinking I'm lazy. And in this particular instant, not being seen and heard. Right. And it's funny because we all kind of deal with these things, right? We all kind of deal with this. Like no one wants to feel like they're not being seen and heard. But the difference is that if you don't like it, but you're kind of like indifferent, like, like I don't like it, but whatever, versus you being triggered and it being in your body are very different things. And we always want to track like how we're feeling in our body when things trigger us, right? So my point to all of this is that when you're sitting here going, I don't want to think about bad things, I don't want to talk about bad things, I don't want to feel bad things, because if I do that, I will attract more bad things. Well, guys, in my world, that's not the way this works, because I do neuroscience manifestation. I have a science backed framework. And let me show you how this works. So let's take my example. So let's take my example of not feeling seen and heard, right? I know that that's still a trigger for me. And if I know that, because my body is literally having a physical reaction, a physical response to it, and I choose to ignore that physical response, I choose to ignore, and then because I'm ignoring the physical sensations, it's creating thoughts and emotions and behaviors. If we just nipped it at the bud and went straight to the source and said, oh, hey, there's a part of me that doesn't feel safe here, or doesn't feel seen here, or doesn't feel whatever, loved here, insert whatever, immediately that sensation is going to calm down. Why? Because the sensation is just there to give you the information. It's literally carrying wisdom for you. It's literally carrying you information. In my case, the sensation is, hey, there's a part of you that still feels very unseen and unheard as a child. Can you go back and do that work? Can you go back and give yourself, like, and this would be inner child work in this case, and it's not always inner child stuff, but a lot of times it can be. In my work, I start with how the neural network was created, and I trace that back with the sensation in your body. So when I do that, it does go to childhood, because normally those patterns and those triggers were created before the age of 7. That's not always the case, but majority of the time it is, right? So a lot of time my stuff does go back to childhood, but that's not the point here. The point is that if I just decided to ignore the sensation, to ignore the emotion, to ignore everything, it would just keep getting more intense, more intense, more intense, until you just feel like you want to explode, right? And the reason that you feel that way, you get to that point where you're like, is because you keep ignoring what it's asking you to look at. And then because of that, you're setting yourself up for a really not great situation, right? When I would rather take 5 minutes a day to process the old story, to process the sensation, to process the emotions, right? With something like tapping, you can literally process that in 5 minutes a day. But you probably don't even need 5 minutes a day. You could probably process that, like, if you worked on it and you did tapping and you like got clear on why, you could even, like, you don't have to do it forever, is what I'm trying to say. It's not like a forever thing. You're never going to have to do it forever. But my point is that we don't skip over the part of your body that is asking you to look at the deeper thing, and then just slap something like, oh, well, people love me. Or my favorite one is when people switch into gratitude. Guys, listen, this is a very, very, very important thing. There is a lot of people out there saying, oh, well, if you just switch into gratitude. Yes, that is true. Gratitude is a very, very high state emotion. If you're in my world and you've done my trainings, or you're in my membership, or you've worked with me privately, you know that I will use gratitude as an anchor a lot. And what I mean by anchor is that we have like anchor states that I call elevated emotions. And we want to anchor in what you want to these elevated emotions. So unconditional love. The unconditional part is important. We don't want to anchor things into maybe love for your partner, because maybe you have fights with your partner. But like unconditional love goes really well with like children, kids, pets, things like that, right? Or like a blanket that your grandmother gave you, like things that you just love and appreciate. Gratitude is another one. Joy, awe, childlike curiosity. Okay. Those are really good positive emotions. But just going straight into gratitude is still skipping the essential step of resolving what the problem is to begin with. That's why when people sit down and they do a gratitude journal every day, and in 30 days they will be more regulated, they will have more gratitude, but the problem that was there will still exist. It will just kind of warp, because that's the way our brains are sneaky. Our brains will warp things so much to keep us from actually getting to the root of what's going on. So what I see is a lot of people come into my world, they've already done manifestation work, or they've already done deep healing work, or they've already done money work. How many times I've heard this? I've already done all of that. And they come into my world, and in a month, they're like, holy shit, this is completely different than what I've been doing, because no one else is teaching them to actually get to the root of what the bad thing is, so they can actually feel more positivity authentically. So imagine this. Let's say it's like a 90-10 thing. So you've got this thing that is like a negative feeling. It's really a trigger for you. It just sucks. And you're trying to be like, I'm gonna do a gratitude journal every morning, right? Instead of just looking at the freaking like what's upsetting you and why, right? And you're gonna do a gratitude journal. So at that point, maybe it's like 10% a bad thing. But as you keep ignoring it, so it's 10% bad thing, 90% positive thing. As you keep ignoring it, the bad thing will keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then the positivity will go smaller, right? Because it's asking you to clear it from your body. If you are not doing the work to clear it from your body, what's going to happen? You will go into toxic positivity. You will be positive in your brain, but your body will be out of whack. Your body will be super dysregulated, super on edge. I know that all of you know what I'm talking about. Worrying, feeling on edge, feeling like overwhelmed. Like all of those things are just your body's way of telling you, hey, you need to clear this. You need to look at it. And guys, the funny part is I know that everyone will what am I trying to say? Will I have experienced this, right? So sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought. Hold on. Let me think about what I was thinking about. It's so weird to do a training without like so many people on, like, dropping their comments. Jen, if you're here, what was I just saying? I lost my train of thought. Um, and yeah, I guess the point, I guess, and what I'm saying, and maybe Jen, like maybe you have something to say about this, but like maybe for you, like, does this make sense? Was there a part of you that was ever worried about, if I touch the bad things, that it's going to create more bad things? Or have you always kind of known, oh no, I actually have to process it. I have to actually sit down with it. I actually have to work through it. Oh, I know what I was going to say. There we go. Back on track. Those things that you put off, right? You put off for weeks, months sometimes, and they seem so big and overwhelming because they're just in your brain. The more that you have something in your brain and it's not being like, it doesn't have an outlet, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you're like, oh my God, this is so big. It's going to take me forever. I don't want to do it. And then you sit down and do it, and it takes you like 20 minutes. And you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe I was beating myself up and making myself miserable for months over this one thing that isn't even that big of a deal. Okay. That's kind of how these emotions are. Not always, because sometimes we do have deeper trauma that needs to be actually like looked at a little bit more. But most of the time, these are just little things that we can start chipping away at that aren't that big. So don't be afraid to sit with your emotions. Like, you are a human being. You are human. You are not a Buddhist monk sitting in a cave somewhere. We have modern day life. We've got jobs that trigger us. We've got people that we work with that trigger us. We've got, in my case, landlords that trigger us. Like, things trigger us. And the trick is not to be like, nothing bothers me. The trick is to be like, why does this bother me? And how do I come back to my center, knowing that the trigger and what my story is about the trigger has nothing to do with me? That is the trick. And then ironically, from doing that, literally taking 5 minutes a day to resolve those negative emotions, to resolve those negative feelings and sensations, from doing that, you will become more positive and have more space and energy in your being to attract in more of what you want. This is really how the law of attraction works. And law of assumption too, there's a few other laws that kind of play into this, but honestly, you don't even need to know the laws. What matters is that I'm going to give you the very simple part of this. What matters is that your brain is saying, yes, I can do and or have and or feel worthy of the thing that I want. And your body is also a yes, right? It is not tensing up. It's not freaking out. It's not but okay. When you think about money, you think about the money that you want. What does your brain say? I'm really curious. Oh my gosh, you have been going through this in the past few days. I'm glad. I love it. I love when things just like work out, right? So I'm glad this is like the perfect training for you. So think about the amount of money you want. It doesn't, don't be logical, just throw a number out. Okay. Now I want you to take a deep breath in, deep breath out. I like to do this like 3 times because I'm on a training. I'm just going to skip ahead. In your body, what is your body telling you on a scale from 1 to 10? How safe does that number feel in your body? If it's not a 10, then you need to do some tapping or other processes to get that feeling like a 10. If you don't feel safe to experience the amount of money that you want to allow yourself to experience it. That's just the way your brain is wired, and your brain talks to your body, which is your nervous system, and that's how it works, right? So you have to get your brain and body on board instead of just positive talks, like toxic positivity of like, I'm good, I'm good, I'm good, because that's only working with your brain. Again, you can install this with just positivity, but it takes longer and it's not a very foolproof and efficient way to do it. If you want to take time and say your mantra every day for 108 times for 30 days and come back to me, go for it. But I would way rather you guys know how this actually works, know how your brain and body works with the law of attraction, so you can shortcut it and be like, wait a minute, I don't need to spend this much time doing this. I know how to resolve these uncomfortable sensations and emotions. I now understand the wisdom they were trying to tell me. And now I actually feel more positive and I feel more centered and I feel more aligned. And from there, that's when you attract in the good stuff. That's when you start feeling magnetic. That's when the people come up to you and they're like, I want to work with you. Or they see your stories. They're like, I want to work with you. Like, that is the trick. That is it. Does that make sense? All right, Jen, do you have any questions? Because I really want to know if this is landing for people and if that I'm making it clear what I'm saying. Okay, perfect. Do you have any questions before I hop off? Okay, amazing. Well, I will see you shortly for our private session today. So much love. See you soon.